Welcome back to Plow and Pantry. Today is one of those days where I am taking a day to do the stuff I love to do. It has been crazy lately with unexpected days off of school for snow, errands, emergency vet visits, stuff that I hadn't planned on, and I'm behind on some of the chores around the house, but it's also the first day in a while that I have had time to just do the things, And so I'm starting today. I know I want to at least get some baking done. So I started today by topping off and changing some containers of supplies. I know I refilled my brown sugar. I'm refilling some almond flour and baking soda and baking powder and just getting things stocked up in the kitchen for the day. I don't normally get low on several things at one time, and I just kind of refill as I go, but every now and then, about once a year, it seems like it all comes together and I end up having to replace or refill several items around the same time. And so on a day like today, when I'm planning on just attending things around the house or tending to things, it's kind of nice to just start by looking at what's low and topping it all off. For some reason, when things get low in the middle of baking, it's like a chore to fill it up and it's kind of a rush. But when I am doing it at the beginning of a day like today, it seems like there's just something calming about it, about just taking the containers and filling them up. It's funny how the same chore can be different. For my baking soda and baking powder here, I dump what's in the bottom of the jar in a little container so that I can put the fresh stuff in the jar and then put my older stuff on top like I just did right there. That way I know I'm still using the older stuff first, but I have the fresh stuff right underneath it ready to be used. Once I have my jars refilled and my counter cleaned up, I decided to go out to the garage where my deep freezer is and get some blackberries I had in there that I bought a while back from Azure Standard, so I can maybe make some blackberry jelly later today. So I put that on the counter and opened it up so that I could let it kind of get airflow and start to thaw. And then I pulled out a recipe I've been wanting to try for Einkorn sandwich bread. And I'm going to start with doing that today. So I'm pulling over, I've got some water, warm water on the counter with my yeast and my Einkorn flour, and I'm pulling over some salt and honey. There aren't a whole lot of ingredients in this bread. And I have not yet, I've made several things with Einkorn flour, but I have not yet made just an actual like sandwich bread or a loaf of bread. I've made cookies, I've made biscuits, I've made tortillas, but this is the first just loaf, and I really wanted to try something out. So I decided to mix this one by hand. I usually do my mixer, but just the feeling of the day, I want to kind of do old school. So I'm getting my warm water in there along with the yeast I'm sprinkling on top. I keep my yeast in that small jar inside, but I buy a big pack at Costco and it stays in my freezer outside, and I have like that little 4-ounce jar in my pantry, and that's what I use. And then when it's empty, I refill from the freezer because the yeast in the freezer stays good for a really long time. There's melted butter going into this. This recipe I will link below, by the way. I got it on the Jovial Foods website. And it has honey. You can use either sugar or honey. I decided to use honey that day. I prefer to go with the natural sugars whenever possible. And then just giving it a gentle mix so that it will start to have, the yeast will start to feed from the from the honey. I decided I needed my apron. Anytime I use flour, I usually stick on an apron because I am messy by nature. I tend to spill things down the front of me. So after a few minutes of it sitting and the yeast blooming, it's time to add flour. So I'm getting the flour into the mix there. This was a smaller one. I only had like 3.5 cups of flour. It makes 1 loaf, by the way. Some bread recipes will make 2 loaves. This made 1 loaf. This is one of 2 different recipes on the website for sandwich bread. And I think I want to try the other one with this same flour because this one was for a einkorn flour sandwich bread, and the other one is for a whole wheat einkorn flour sandwich bread. But like I said, it's from the Jovial Foods website, and I did not use Jovial Foods flour. I get my einkorn from Azure Standard, and it's called Unifine, and I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be all-purpose or whole wheat, so I would kind of like to do the other recipe just to compare. I have a feeling this is the regular one, and I have a feeling that this would do better with the whole wheat or being treated as a whole wheat just from the end of it. It did come out as a very good loaf, but I wonder if it would rise more or be a little more fluffy if it was done the whole wheat way, as if it were treated like a whole wheat flour. Using my little hand mixer, what are those called, like Dutch blenders or something? My mother-in-law got me that for Christmas one year. And I tend to use it for things that aren't actually bread related, but today it just seemed like the right tool. So I'm getting that all mixed together. It's a very shaggy dough. It does not, when you're using einkorn, it does not behave like the regular flour. It's a little bit stickier and shaggier and not like that round, smooth ball of dough that you're used to with regular flour. So I'm getting this covered and over, sitting on top of my stove to rise. The stove isn't on, it's just the warmest part of my kitchen. Cleaning up the counter. You will see me ending up cleaning up the counter many times today, but after getting the flour and dough stuff cleaned up, I like to give it a clean with the cleaner and rinse with water. I decided to bring over some eggs and get those washed up and make some hard-boiled eggs for lunches this week, for salads, for snacks, for maybe some deviled eggs Sunday night. I don't know, we'll see. But I have a lot of eggs. My chickens lay during the winter. They slow down quite a bit, but I still get plenty of eggs. And now that the sun is coming out more, the day is getting a little bit longer, they are right back into full swing. And I'm getting like 9 eggs a day, so I need to use some eggs. I like to get them washed right before I use them and then rinse them out, get them scrubbed and rinsed both before I get them in the Instant Pot. That's how I like to make my hard-boiled eggs. I'm also washing the bowl there because I'm going to use that again once the eggs are finished being hard-boiled, because they go straight into an ice water bath the way I do them, so I have that ready. Getting the eggs rinsed off and then over into the Instant Pot. Have to get it down. I store it underneath my counter here. The Instant Pot is my favorite way to do hard-boiled eggs, especially the farm fresh eggs that are harder to peel. It's so much easier to peel. You just stick them in. I do mine for 9 minutes. I have found that Instant Pots are kind of like crock pots and that everyone's are just a little bit off in time. You know, like some crock pots are 4 hours, some are 6. Instant Pots are the same. People go anywhere from 7 to 9 minutes for a fully hard-boiled egg, a little bit less if you want like a soft-boiled egg. But I just put about a cup of water in the bottom along with my raw clean eggs, and then I let it go for 9 minutes, and that's just how I do them. It's easy, it's hands-off, and they're so easy to peel afterwards. I've done them so many different ways, and I have tried all the tricks, and this to me is the easiest way to peel hard-boiled eggs. And it's much easier way to cook them than doing the old boil in a pan method from way back when, you know. For a long time I did them in the oven, but now I love the Instant Pot for them. So I decided to go out behind on my back porch. I have this tub that is still half full of garlic from last year's garden. And I have made several garlic things. I've made garlic confit. I've used garlic for cooking. I have frozen some. I have roasted some. We've done all the garlic, but I still have this stuff to deal with. And it's been sitting on my back porch. And while it's not exposed to rain on the back porch, it's not an enclosed porch or anything. It is fully exposed to all the freezing temperatures. So I wasn't even sure these would be good. I also planted some of these as seed, by the way. But these ended up mostly being good. I think I only had to throw away about 4 bulbs out of the whole tub, and there were dozens still in there. And so you'll see me doing this on and off today in between things. My bread dough is rising over there, so I'm doing the garlic. Right now I'm just breaking the bulbs apart and then peeling off the paper around the outside of each clove. And these have sprouted. These are good, but they have sprouted. And there's a misconception out there that sprouted garlic is bitter and not useful. It actually is not. It is still usable. You just have to take out that green sprout. The green sprout is what's bitter. So after I break apart bulbs and get the paper off, I slice them in half right through the middle of those green sprouts that are just starting to come up through them, and they pull right out of the middle, and it's pretty easy to do. As for taking out the garlic cloves from the heads and the papers from the garlic cloves and that kind of thing, I have never discovered a really great way to do it. I have tried all different tricks I've read and seen, shaking them in a bowl and smacking them with things. And I've really just decided over time that the easiest way for me is to trim the bottom where it's attached to the bulb, trim the bottom of the clove where it's attached to the bulb, and that just loosens the paper and makes the first side peel off and the rest just come right off. If I'm using like 1 or 2 cloves to cook, I'll smash them with the side of my knife and then pull off the paper. But when I'm doing this was literally like 300 cloves of garlic today. So that just is too hard on my hand after 4 or 5 cloves, and it'll be bruised. I've done that before. As it was by the end of this day, I had some spots underneath my fingernails, my thumbnails, where I was peeling skins away that were already getting a little sore in there, almost like little paper cuts from the paper. But I just slice these in half and then pull out those little green sprouts, and they come right out. Every now and then you have to struggle with one, but usually you don't. And then the white part that's left is still perfectly good. And today I'm going to end up putting this in the freeze dryer so that I can make garlic powder. I'm going to throw some onions in there too. I end up washing my hands several times during this because garlic gets a little bit sticky. And so after a while I have to just like refresh my fingers. I'll every now and then clean off the knife. Every now and then I'll clean off the cutting board. It's just how it goes. I ended up going into my closet, my cleaning closet in the laundry room right next door to the kitchen there. I have this stool that folds flat that I normally use in the summer and canning season. My eggs are ready here, and I'm just pulling them out. So when my Instant Pot goes off, I turn it off and do the quick release and then put them straight into an ice bath. And then from that point, they are really easy to peel. I did have one crack there. I don't know if you saw it, but it was fine. So just get these straight into an ice bath. The sooner you peel them after they come out, the easier they are to peel. So it's best if they are still warm. And so by the time they sit in there for a few seconds, they're cool enough to handle. And then I put down a paper towel just to keep my counter clean and just kind of roll it. And the shells just kind of fall right off. And I stick the egg back in the ice bath just to take off any leftover tiny bits of shell stuck to it and to keep it cooling down while I'm doing the rest of the eggs. It's kind of like a way of washing them off. Because as I do several of them, I'll sometimes end up with a little bit of like a small fleck of shell here and there stuck to my fingers. It'll get stuck to the egg, and it just helps wash them off faster. I think I did a dozen eggs this day. That way I have plenty for several different meals and snacks coming up. I just keep rolling and peeling. Exciting day here. Once they're ready, I like to put them in a container with a paper towel in the bottom. It just helps absorb some of that liquid from the water that they're sitting in, which helps them last longer. And then the first time that I take this out of the fridge, I usually change that paper towel out. It'll be wet by then, but the next one won't be as wet. And keeping the eggs dry helps them last longer in the refrigerator. But I'm just getting them into the container here and then into the refrigerator so that they are ready for future use. And then I'm getting right back to the garlic. Actually, I'm cleaning up first. There's something about doing the dishes on a day like this when I'm just doing a little bit here and there and kind of just being a homebody that feels kind of relaxing. But when it's like your regular everyday dishes, it's always a chore. I don't know what it is. There's just something different about it. Back to the garlic I go while I'm waiting on the bread still, and I'm just doing more cloves, peeling them, cutting them, pulling out those sprouts. Then my timer went off for my bread, and so I sat the garlic aside to get it out of my way, and then I'm cleaning up the counter a bit so that I can work with the risen bread dough. It's over there in my bowl. And it did take a little bit longer than the recipe said to rise, but it's a cold winter day. That happens a lot in winter. But it only took I think I gave it an extra 12 or so minutes. It wasn't that bad. It was kind of hard to tell compared to regular all-purpose flour loaves because, like I said, it's not that nice round ball. It's this shaggy little mess. So to look at it and see if it's doubled was a little bit different than normal. But you could tell that it had risen. So I'm getting that stool out of the way, getting my counter ready. Now the recipe asked to flour the surface lightly because you don't want to add too much flour to the bread. You don't want it to dry out. Einkorn is prone to doing that. So I thought I was doing a light amount compared to normal, but you'll see it's actually hardly needed at all. I thought because it is a sticky dough, I thought that I would need more, and so I put more on the counter, but it really didn't actually stick that much, which is weird because it looks sticky, it is a little bit sticky, it looks shaggy, but it didn't really need a whole lot of flour. It didn't really stick to the flour. So I'm just getting it out and turning it on to the surface here. And at this point, I don't have to punch it down or do anything like that. It's just, you're just shaping it into a loaf. That is it. And it actually shapes pretty easily. That is really all there is to it right there. And it's like, get the loaf pan out and get it in. So as you can see, I very much over floured my surface. But I just went to wash my hands and get my bread pan oiled and ready to put the loaf in there. So it was actually a really easy loaf to shape and get in the pan. And at this point, I just put it back on my stove to do its second rise. And I just covered it with my dish towel. At this point, instead of plastic wrap, you can do either one. And it was time to clean up all that flour that I didn't need but used, and make sure that my surface was ready to get back to the garlic. So I washed my hands, washed the counter, pull the stool back over, pull the garlic all back over so that I can continue that. This is like an all-day job here that I'm just doing parts of in between the other things, like rising of the bread and making of jelly, you'll see later, stuff like that. So it's kind of tedious, but breaking it up helped quite a bit And I like to do just a few heads at a time so that if I want to quit somewhere in here and stick the rest outside, I can. It's not going to be all falling apart and have to deal with it right away. Once my dough had risen, I have the oven preheated and I'm sticking that in there. And then it's time to go back to the garlic. You can see though that I'm actually making some headway here. I've done about half of the heads that were in that blue tub when I started in the morning, even though it's a few hours later. Garlic is not my favorite job to do, but I love growing it. I love growing the ones I want to taste, that I like the flavor of. And now we are getting bread out of the oven. I'm tapping it around a little bit just to make sure it's ready. I usually go by the sound. And then it's back to the garlic. I know you're surprised here. This is like the saga of the day. It's the garlic saga. But at this point, I'm on the tail end. I have dumped about 3 big bowls into the compost from the papers, and now I'm putting the rest into that blue tub because I am on the last few cloves, pulling out those sprouts and getting the last few ones done. And I'm not going to lie, I almost did a little jig when I finished the last clove because I was excited to be finished. More than once, I was like, maybe I'll put the rest away for another day. And then I was like, no, you know what? I would like to just have it done and not have to think about it again. I mean, it's almost time to not harvest garlic again, but, you know, like it's been planted and it's starting to sprout. So we're almost back to the season where we're going to have to harvest garlic and process it again. So having it done feels good. It was the last thing on my back porch. I was really surprised at how well it went through the weather because we have had snow and freezing days, and that garlic was mostly still good. Doing some cleanup here, getting things out of the way. I do end up rinsing that garlic that's in the bowl, the peeled cloves, just because some dirt can still get on it, stuff like that. So I do rinse those off, but I don't think I showed that in the video, and I just want you to know that. And I can put my stool away and do a little bit of cleanup. And I think I am getting in the mood to make some jelly with this blackberry stuff. I need to make sure that the blackberries are thawed though so that I can juice them. And I'm cleaning, oh, that's a chicken tub with the eggshells. That's where those will go. Putting away my flour. Just getting some stuff that I'm done with over and put away. Getting my Instant Pot cleaned up. The flour's put away, the eggshells are put away, all that stuff. Almost like a midday reset going on here. I'm not doing any deep cleaning today. I'm doing more like just clean as you go on the Homestead kitchen stuff kind of day. Because that's pretty much where I am today, is just in the kitchen. Finally, my bread loaf is cool enough to get it onto the pan to finish cooling. I love the smell. And for some reason, putting a loaf of bread on a cooling rack is like one of my favorite things. There's just some feeling it gives me. Makes me happy. I swapped out my apron for a canning apron to go start on this juice over here. I'm going to get my juicer out and start on the blackberries. If I seem disjointed at all in this narration, I am dealing with a puppy who is hurt and needing a lot of attention here and there and having to stop this and start back up again. So you'll see that I start juicing some berries here and it's going really, really slow. They are not completely, they feel thawed to me, but they're still really cold, and so the juice is really too thick to go through. So I kept the blackberries in the plastic bag they're in and put them in a pan of hot water to help them thaw a little faster. And then I got them back into the juicer, and that was much better, much better. Finally got that whole package. I'm not sure. I'll have to look at what size package that was. That made 4 cups of juice just straight through. And then after I made jelly here, I squeezed the pulp and got a few more cups of juice. I'm just putting the juice in a stock pot with lemon juice and with some pectin because I'm starting jelly, and that's how you do it. So I'm over at the stove just getting it all started, getting it all mixed together and heated up. And then while it's starting to heat, I'm also measuring out some sugar so that I can put that in. This is regular pectin, not a low sugar recipe. So I'm using 4 cups of juice, and I'm using 4.5 cups of sugar. You can use anywhere from 4 to 5, but because this was a thick juice, that is usually good for gelling, and so I went with a little bit less sugar. I do less whenever I can. Pulling over my lids and my rings, and then that paper towel there, I was getting some foam off of the spatula. I was doing my plate test for Jell, which if you've seen my other videos, you know that that's how I test for Jell. And then I like to, for jelly, put it in a pitcher so that I can easily pour it into the jars rather than using the funnel and a ladle. It's just a cleaner way, in my opinion, but everyone kind of has their own method. You get into a rhythm, and that's always helpful. So I got 4 half-pint jars out of this and a 5th almost full, so I kept the 5th one out just for our personal use right away and to put in the fridge. And then these I filled up, wiped the rims, put the lids on, put the rings on fingertip tight, and got them into the canner. Jelly is always a 1/4 inch headspace, and at my altitude, I have to put it in the canner for 10 minutes, but most people it is 5 minutes. And while that was gelling, I went out and gave the chickens some pulp and some eggshells. And when I came back in, I pulsed up that garlic in my food processor, and I got it onto some freeze dryer trays so that I could put it in the freeze dryer. I want to make garlic powder with this. I did mention in a previous video that I used to put it in the dehydrator, and I really didn't like the taste of that. It made it kind of concentrated cooked taste, and so I stopped doing it. And but I've heard that the onion powder and garlic powder from the freeze dryer is really good, so I'm going to try this out. I also, what I did not put here is I put a couple slices of bread on top of each tray because I've heard, I was asking in a Facebook group of people who have done it. I was worried about the whole freeze dryer smelling or affecting the flavors in the future of the garlic and onion since they are so strong. And people said that if you put bread on top, not only could you use it for croutons later, but it'll absorb a lot of that odor. So after I got the 2 trays of garlic spread out, I chopped up some onions. I did 2 yellow onions with my favorite little Veggie Chopper tool. I want to turn those into onion powder, so that was a nice tool to make them go smaller as well. And then for the red onion, I sliced it up and put slices on there because I have also heard that freeze-dried onion strips are really good on salads, kind of like those French fried onions you get in a can, but that they have their own little crunch and flavor. And so I got the yellow onions out in the pan, and then I sliced up some red onions and did just like a small section of that so that I could try that whole red onion thing going on. And then it was time to get the jelly jars out of the canner. And so I momentarily stopped my onion chopping to go get those out, lifting up the rack and pulling those. They have been sitting without the top on for 5 minutes after their 10-minute process. And then I like to put them on a towel on the counter, not just on the hard counter, and pulled out the jars. I got a new jar lifter that I like. It is a little more stout and it's a little more grip friendly. So I'm enjoying that. I will link that below if you want one like that. But I've been using it, and then I'm back to my red onions over here. I've got my yellow onions spread out, and I just want like shreds, little sticks of red onion is what I'm putting on that tray. I'm really hopeful about those because I like pickled onion in my salad, but the crunchy freeze-dried onion sounds good too. I will maybe let you know if I remember in a future video how those came out. So somewhere in there I stopped for lunch and a snack later. This has been like an all-day thing here. And I decided for the last thing today, my body's pretty tired, I'm almost done. I'm just gonna make a quick batch of soap. And this is, I'm using an oil blend I found actually at Hobby Lobby that I'm really liking because it cuts out some of the time. It is already pre-blended. It's got a couple different types of oil for like hardness, for lather, for skin smoothing, stuff like that. So I'm getting it in there and getting it blended up so that it's thicker and I can add the lye water to it, which is what I'm doing right here, adding that lye water and then pulling it up to trace with my blender and getting some smell in here. I am doing lavender sandalwood in there. So it's actually a really nice light smell that could be either for a guy or a girl. So it's gonna go in my shower for my husband and I. And I'm getting it into the soap mold here. It is a 3 pounds of soap recipe. If you have never tried making your own soap and you want to get into it, I would say go to Hobby Lobby and check out these little kits they have now. They are actually a pretty good way to get started. I have only been making soap a few weeks, but I find this to be the easiest way for now until I want to get more detailed about my own blends of things. I'm putting some dried lavender stuff on top, just kind of an indicator of what's in it and because it's pretty. And then I decided it is time to enjoy a snack. So I cut open that loaf of bread. When you cook with einkorn, you do have to wait for it to cool all the way. And I'm giving it a taste. It is good. And I'm enjoying it, and I decided to go over and get that not full jar of jelly I made, and it's been sitting out on the counter, and it is gelling up already, but it's still warm, and so that was just delicious to have warm jelly on fresh bread, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I am going to end the day here, and thank you for joining me. I hope to see you guys on the next video.